Jon Rahm may be about to blow up LIV Golf's entire future, and the timing could not be worse. Because this isn't some minor scheduling dispute or a player venting after a bad round. Reports are now suggesting that the man who symbolized LIV's entire war with the PGA Tour, the single biggest signing the league has ever made, is preparing to walk away from it. Not quietly, not without consequences. This is a decision that could blow up the sport's biggest ongoing conflict, and it's landing at the worst possible moment. Right now, LIV Golf is fighting to close the most important chapter in its short history. A new investor, a financial reset, a league trying to prove it can survive without its original backers propping up every dollar. Just as that story is supposed to be turning a corner, a far bigger storm is forming right behind it, one that has nothing to do with spreadsheets or term sheets and everything to do with the man swinging the clubs. This isn't about a struggling player quietly looking for the exit. It's almost the opposite, and that's what makes it dangerous. This is about one of LIV's most successful signings possibly deciding that winning isn't enough to keep him there. And if that happens, the fallout won't stay contained to one golfer, one team, or one league. It could crash straight into the PGA Tour itself. The player at the center of it all is Jon Rahm. And here's the part that should worry LIV the most. This isn't coming out of nowhere. This has been building for months, quietly, in the background, while the league kept its public focus on chasing fresh capital. Nobody wanted to talk about Rahm's situation while the investor story was still unresolved, because admitting there might be a problem with the roster while also admitting there's a problem with the money would have been two crises at once. Now it looks like LIV might be facing exactly that. Rewind to December 2023. Rahm wasn't a fringe player chasing a lucrative side gig on his way out the door. He ranked among the best golfers on the planet, a major champion, a Masters winner, the player who represented everything traditional golf claimed it was fighting to protect. And he left anyway. For a reported $300 million, Rahm didn't just join LIV Golf. He validated it, and validation was worth more to LIV at that moment than almost anything money could buy. For a league that had spent 2 years getting dismissed as a retirement tour for players chasing one last payday, Rahm was proof of something else entirely. He was still winning. He was still elite. His signing wasn't a farewell lap, it was a declaration. LIV could pull players in their absolute prime, not just fading names looking for a soft landing on the way down. That distinction mattered more than any single trophy Rahm went on to win. And for a while, that bet paid off in full. Rahm didn't fade into the background. He dominated it. He won. Multiple times. He became one of the most consistent performers in the entire league, and just recently, he locked up his third consecutive individual LIV championship. This is not a player who underperformed and is now hunting for an escape hatch. This is a player who delivered exactly what he was paid 9 figures to deliver and may still be walking away regardless. That's what makes this so different from every LIV departure rumor that came before it. This isn't a story about failure. This is a story about success not being enough to keep him there, and that should terrify LIV far more than any single loss ever could. Consider what that number actually represents. $300 million wasn't just a contract, it was a message to the rest of the sport. It told every player still sitting on the fence that LIV wasn't a landing spot for fading careers, it was a legitimate destination for players still at the absolute peak of their powers. Every recruiting pitch LIV made after Rahm signed leaned on his name. Every argument that LIV could compete with the PGA Tour on legitimacy, not just on money, pointed straight back to him. Here's where it gets ugly, because this isn't one issue pulling Rahm toward the exit. It's 3, and they're all hitting at once. The first is the money. Reports indicate LIV still owes Rahm a massive, undisclosed 9-figure sum from his original contract. There have reportedly been conversations about how that obligation gets handled as the league restructures around new investment. But here's the detail that changes everything. Rahm reportedly has no real interest in converting that guaranteed money into equity in a reshaped, unproven LIV operation. He signed for cash certainty. Being asked to trade that for a stake in a business still fighting for its survival is an entirely different bet, and it's one he may not be willing to take quietly. Investor pressure is the second problem, and it's an ugly one. LIV Commissioner Scott O'Neill has been racing to finalize a term sheet with a new backer, a deal that reportedly could hinge, at least in part, on whether the league's top talent stays committed. Some of that talent has already answered the question. Bryson DeChambeau isn't going anywhere. Rahm's situation, though, is the opposite of settled, and if the league's single most expensive signing is preparing to walk right as it's trying to convince a new investor the roster is stable, that is not a coincidence LIV wants anywhere near this negotiation. And then there's the third problem, the one that could matter more than the other two combined, the Ryder Cup. Put those three pressures side by side, and a pattern starts to emerge. The money is a wedge, the investor situation is a deadline, the Ryder Cup is the pull factor drawing him somewhere else entirely. Any single one of these on its own might be manageable. All three arriving at the same time, right as LIV needs its roster to look rock solid, is the kind of scenario that turns a manageable situation into a genuine crisis. Earlier this year, Rahm struck a deal with the DP World Tour. He settled outstanding fines, committed to playing a handful of events, and clawed back his path toward Ryder Cup eligibility for 2027. At the time, that felt like a clean compromise, a way to keep one foot in traditional golf's biggest team event while still running his full LIV schedule. But that compromise is reportedly falling apart. The DP World Tour has apparently signaled to LIV players that the kind of conditional release Rahm relied on this year is highly unlikely to be handed out again in 2027. If that holds, LIV players entering conflicting events could once again face real sanctions, the very collision this whole arrangement was supposed to prevent in the first place, which leaves Rahm boxed in. Stay with LIV, and his relationship with the DP World Tour gets messier by the week. Leave, and he potentially clears a straight path back to traditional golf, and to the Ryder Cup stage he's made unmistakably clear still matters to him. So this was never just a scheduling headache. This is about where Jon Rahm wants the next chapter of his career to actually live. And once you frame it that way, the decision stops looking surprising, even if it's the last thing on earth LIV wants to hear right now. And it's worth remembering just how hard Rahm fought to get that eligibility restored in the first place. He didn't have to settle those fines. He didn't have to commit to 5 DP World Tour events on top of his full LIV schedule. He did it because the Ryder Cup wasn't negotiable to him, even after everything that came with leaving the PGA Tour. That's not the move of a player who's indifferent to the sport's most prestigious stages. That's the move of a player quietly keeping the door open the entire time. If Rahm really does walk away from LIV, one question hits immediately. Where does he go next? For PGA Tour fans, there's one possibility too big to ignore. Could Jon Rahm actually come back? Nothing here is confirmed, and it wouldn't be simple even if he wanted it to be. Golf has already watched players make this exact walk back. Brooks Koepka has returned to PGA Tour competition this year. Patrick Reed is working his way back too. So the idea of a LIV player reintegrating isn't theoretical anymore. It's already happening live in real time. But Rahm would be different, much different. Koepka and Reed returning is a notable story. Jon Rahm returning would be seismic. Picture it. Rahm back in the field at a regular PGA Tour event. Rahm going head-to-head with Scottie Scheffler again, not in some one-off exhibition, but week after week, in real tournament conditions. Rahm back among the players who stayed when he left, back on the very fairways he walked away from less than 3 years ago. The attention that moment would generate is almost impossible to overstate. For a PGA Tour that has spent years insisting it doesn't need LIV's money or its stars to remain golf's premier stage, getting back a player of Rahm's caliber wouldn't just be a win. It would be a statement heard across the entire sport, a live demonstration that the gravitational pull still runs toward the tour, not away from it. And the timing only cranks up the pressure. LIV's 2026 regular season is heading toward its finale in Indianapolis, and according to the latest reporting, Rahm's decision could land within weeks, not months. Not because there's a trophy left to chase, but because fans watching him right now may already be watching the final chapter of his LIV career without even realizing it. Think about what that would actually mean for the leaderboard alone. Scheffler, Rahm, McIlroy, all sharing the same fairways on a normal Thursday instead of splitting across 2 separate tours that rarely collide outside the majors. Ratings would spike, ticket demand would spike, and every player still on LIV would suddenly be facing a very public reminder of exactly who chose to walk back across the line. Step back from Rahm for a second, because there's a much bigger problem sitting underneath all of this. LIV Golf doesn't just need fresh investment, It needs stars willing to stay committed while that investment gets sorted out. Those are two separate fires, and right now, the league is getting tested by both of them simultaneously, with no guarantee either one resolves cleanly. If Jon Rahm becomes the most significant LIV player yet to walk away during this transition window, the question the entire golf world will be asking isn't just what happens to Rahm, it's whether he's the exception, one unusual case with unique circumstances, or the first domino in something far bigger. A league's most successful, best-paid, most visible player deciding the deal isn't worth it anymore is a brutal look at any time. Doing it while a new investor is deciding whether to write a check makes it far worse. And to be fair, leaving LIV wouldn't hand Rahm a PGA Tour card automatically. There are eligibility rules, procedures, a return process that even Koepka and Reed had to fight through. Walking away doesn't guarantee Rahm a soft landing anywhere. But he wouldn't just be another player testing that path. He was one of the faces of the entire LIV PGA split. If he's the one who reverses course, that carries a weight no other player who's tried this has ever carried. Compare his position to Koepka's or Reed's for a moment. Neither of them was the marquee free agent signing of an entire offseason. Neither of them arrived with a $300 million price tag attached to their name. Rahm did, and that changes how this gets covered, how it gets debated, and how much scrutiny follows him, no matter which tour he ultimately calls home. Here's what makes this genuinely explosive, not just another speculation cycle. If Rahm leaves LIV and eventually finds his way back to the PGA Tour, that's not one storyline resolving. That's two storylines flipping at once. LIV loses one of the most important players it has ever signed, right as it's trying to prove its financial future is secure. The PGA Tour, meanwhile, could be gaining back one of the best golfers alive at the exact moment it wants to project maximum strength and stability of its own. That's why the next few weeks matter this much. Nothing is official yet. Rahm hasn't announced a departure. LIV hasn't confirmed it's losing him. But the latest reporting says this situation is accelerating fast, and negotiations this loaded rarely stay quiet once a decision point gets this close. So here's where it stands. A superstar who was supposed to be the face of LIV Golf's long-term future may instead become the biggest name yet to blow it up. A league racing to close a defining investment deal is now staring down uncertainty around one of its most expensive commitments. And a PGA Tour that spent years insisting it didn't need LIV's biggest signings back might be about to get exactly that handed to it anyway. None of this needed to collide the way it has. Take away the investor deadline, and Rahm's contract dispute is a quiet, private negotiation nobody outside golf's inner circle ever hears about. Take away the Ryder Cup ruling, and his LIV frustrations stay just that, frustrations, not an exit plan. It's the collision of all three at once that turned a manageable disagreement into a genuine crisis, and that's precisely why it's impossible to look away from right now. What do you think? If Jon Rahm really leaves LIV, should he go back to the PGA Tour? Would you want to see him back on the same course as Scottie Scheffler and the rest of the players who never left? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more, and turn on notifications so you don't miss it the second this story breaks. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.